So there's been a lot of videos lately. We've been uploading, finishing off that sports satellite. But a lot of videos means a lot going on and a lot of work. So this week we're a little bit quieter, kind of taking it a little bit easy. So this is the 56 Dodge Lancer Custom Royale. Basically all I've done here is this was all primed already, but there was some spots that weren't quite right. Cleaned them up and filled them. Any little nick pinhole spot that I could see going close with a light. You know, we hit them all with a little bit of filler. I had to move it outside and back in, and I was worried about rain, so I primed a couple of spots real quick. That's the gray patches. But anyway, we're going to grab a like 320 on a sander, and we're just going to spin that off smooth. And as far as I'm concerned, that'll be good enough for this car. It'll be ready for the blue. It's more of a greeny blue turquoise. There's the color there. So that sits underneath the double jet trim, wraps over the fender and then down the side. We're just going to airbrush it in between the bumper and the grill shells. We're not going to touch in there. We could take it all apart, but you know, we're not going to. This car is not that. This is just an old Survivor. We're not too worried about it. Not restoring this. You can see the fender here is really nice and smooth. So I did the same thing. It had all these little nicks and chips, and so we cleaned it up and sanded it down. Gonna fix down here. There's some weirdness there. We just kind of use a roll lock and zipped out the bad filler, put in some good filler. It wasn't bad. It was just, I can't remember what was there. I think it was one of them was cracked or something, and you know, it wasn't the best. A low spot there we filled. And this one here, before I sand that, I'm going to put a little more fill. The rest of the door is nice. Now, unlike the other side, which will be ready in half an hour, this side we had to put a bunch of fill right underneath the point. I'll get a little closer there, I guess. So that's pretty good and smooth now. Looks a little weird there, but oh, it's just dust. Yeah, that's nice and smooth. So that's ready for primer and paint. All down there. It's not too bad. But right here, I put filler in because it looked like a hollow, and I learned that I'm gonna have to put a little more, and I'm gonna have to run it to way up here. I think when he was fixing the car, the guy that was doing it, he came up so high and then from the top down, so there's like a probably about here. Well, maybe not there. Right here, that's where it was. Right here, there's like a low spot in there. So we're going to fill that and board that. And this piece here has a low spot kind of up in there. The whole thing was low. Most of it's good now, but that little spot in there, we're going to put a bit of fill there too. We're going to run a block on those and block those out. But the rest of the car will be quick and easy. But he was good with it the way it was. But when I saw that, I realized once there's some shiny paint on there, you're going to see like it's going to look like somebody rubbed something. You know, it's not even really an imperfection at that point. People are going to think, wow, it's like there's a dent and you painted over it. So we're not going to let that one go. But other than that, that's all we're doing. And this would have been a factory paint job. That would have been the color, that bluey color. You can see it coming through the primer. And then the black, and then the white top. They called it what do you call it, a three-tone. So then they had white in here on both sides to kind of match the top. Cool thing is, when you look at the back, it's like those old Chevys with the black and white. What were they, the 510s? You know, you wouldn't even know that there's a third color on the car, and then you come around the side and you see that greeny blue wraps around the car, but the whole front is the greeny blue. So the back of the car is black and white, and then the front of the car is going to be mostly greeny blue with a black hood, right? Because all that gray primer is going to be that color there. So kind of a neat custom paint job for the 50s. You know, not bad for a stock Dodge. Push button automatic Hemi car. Story behind this car was a bunch of cousins and brothers owned it back in the back in the 60s, and they drove it. One guy drove it and beat the hell out of it till the motor died or something, and then the next brother put a powertrain in it and did it. And, you know, this was one of these cars that just kept going and going for a bunch of different people. And then the last guy that owned it, he parked it in the junkyard, pulled the wheels and tires, and let it sit there for 3-4 years. So the guy that owns it now, he's a relative of the same bunch, I guess, and he's an in-law, though, I think. But anyway, he basically thought the car was too cool to let sit there. He's a big Chevy guy, but that didn't matter. He figured it's look at this weird, unusual thing, and it's too good to let rot away. So he did have to put new rockers on it, and then he did a bunch of, you know, old school body work, you know, the stuff it with filler and clean it up. Now he did put metal in, but it's all kind of torch welded and, you know, old school. So the bottom of the fender, someone put the rocker out too far, and he was upset about it, so he decided to go ahead and do the fender out to the rocker. And I mean, for what the car is, I don't think that's going to matter. Once that's smooth and painted with that green aqua color, turquoise, whatever it is, it'll look just fine. It's going to be a nice driver. The trick to these cars is they're not worth a whole lot, so you don't want to put a whole bunch of money. Now, if you get a really nice one with really good chrome, now the bumper is really nice on the back. The nickel's all good, but the rest of the chrome's a little bit pitted, some of it more pitted than other stuff. But I mean, when you have all the trim on this the way it is, with that color down at the bottom, I mean, that'll be a real interesting driver. And I mean, he's got a Hemi, one of those Firepower, Chrysler Firepower, out of a 58 or 59. So, I mean, this thing can move. Now, originally, this car would have had a really small Hemi. So, people don't realize, you know, the Hemis, they came out in the 50s, like, what, 52? Could be earlier, but I know these cars had the little Hemis from 52, and by 56, 57, they had, like, 2 Hemis, a little one and then a little bit bigger one. And anyway, I don't know the cubic inches. He told me 371, and then I realized later, no, that's not right. That was wrong. But anyway, whatever it is, it is. You know what? Let's have a quick look at it. Some guys out there might know what it is. If you do, throw it in the comments. So this is the really, really big one right before the 426, which people call the Elephant. The Elephant was built off this, but look how big this is. This is big. It's got 2x2 block shims under the motor mounts. I don't know if we can catch those down there. There you go. And the reason why was to get the, you can see the control arm under there. So by having the engine 2 inches high, the manifolds, the exhaust manifolds, have lots of clearance to the control arms. Or if you look at the back, like it's a little bit snugger, but there's plenty of room. And then he also, because he raised the front of the engine up 2 inches, the transmission had to be raised up. Anyway, you got to figure out the math for that, but you got to raise that up so that the drive line and the drive shaft all kind of runs together, because you don't want to tilt stuff, right, and eat up U-joints. And the race car guys back in the 60s, and that's when this guy was in his prime. So when he found this engine for the car, he thought, well, if it don't fit, and he didn't set this up for racing, but he knew how to run the whole drive shaft, transmission, and engine, so you tilt the whole thing, you know. And anyway, it just allows a little bit of the weight to shift to the back axle to take off, in theory, right? That was a trick that the old guys did back in the day. This is before aftermarket and everything was built out of junkyard parts. So when he had this big engine, it was just like, well, that's no problem. We'll just raise the powertrain. How he knew it would fit under the tunnel, that's, you know, probably experience. He probably did stuff years ago. But he's a big GM guy. He's a 61 bubble top Impala owner. And he's working on that now. We're going to see that next summer in the shop, because we're going to paint it for him next summer. But this was just something that was so bizarre, so weird, and so odd, but also pretty good underneath. And it's really nice underneath. It was just the rockers and all the lower tin work was toast. So he fixed all that up, and it sat in his garage for 30-some years while he played with it. Now that he's retired, he brought it out and said, hey, can you go over it and just touch it up, finish it, and just paint it? And he goes, you know, too bad you can't make the paint look old. So I don't know about that, but we'll throw the paint on. And maybe what we'll do, if it's too shiny and you don't like it, well, it doesn't mean we can't grab some Scotch-Brite and scuff it up, make it look old, throw some chips in it. I don't know. I mean, we could do a full patina job, but we don't want to go crazy. We just want to put the blue on and have it look old. But honestly, the black is pretty shiny and the white's really nice. And neither of those two paints are original, but for older paint, like, it looks really good. It's got a good shine on it. You know, there's a few ripples in the car, but even though it's a black car, there's a little ding in here somewhere, I think. Yeah, and a touch up. But like, the car's presentable. It's a good looking car. It's a little bit dusty because, you know, I'm doing my thing, but very interesting car. Something you can have a lot of fun with. Brings us back to when we were talking last week or 2 weeks ago about the perfect car. And a few other channels have been talking about it lately. So I made my video where I explained sometimes maybe getting a car that's a driver would be more fun for most people. It doesn't mean you can't fix it up as you're going, but, you know, don't bring something home and tear it apart because it ain't perfect, and then you don't enjoy it for years because it never goes back together, right? Now, that being said, if you like the whole American graffiti thing and, right, some of these 50s cars, I mean, this is not my first choice of car, but if you picked it up for, gosh, I don't know. I don't even know what you'd pay for something like this. I'm going to say on a good day, once it's painted, well, the owner figured once it was painted, it'd be worth about 12 thou on the market. You could appraise it for more, but really, these 50s cars, sometimes you get them in 5-6 grand, and, you know, and a lot of them run and drive. Fix it up yourself, slap some paint on it, learn to paint, and if it ain't perfect, who cares? But if you can drive it around, I say you're ahead. You know, this is a car that you can get in and drive around and enjoy it. It's not a valuable car, so things weren't done in an expensive way, but they were done just to clean it up. You know, interior was pretty good. This material was all disintegrating and falling apart. So he cut all the stitching off, reused this, and you can see over the old piping, he hand stitched right over. Its material goes under and it's stitched through here, and he went around the piping. Here it's all hand stitched back together. The thread had rotted away. So again, not a perfect interior, but look, when I'm standing back here and I don't really know the difference, it's clean, it's presentable, you can drive it. No, great car for going out for burgers, ice cream, take the grandkids for a rip. Now, the one thing he noticed, even when he had all the primer down here, he took it to a few car shows the way it was, and of course he had the chrome pieces on it. And it gets a lot of attention because people, well, they don't recognize it or know what it is, right? So they walk up and they look at it, and, you know, people don't understand, some people, the whole car hobby and whatnot. And I like doing it because, oddly, I mean, I like the cars. I also like working on something different. So when you get a 50s car or something bizarre, you know, everything is a muscle car in the shop. And then all of a sudden you get a few that aren't. And to me, that's just fun. But this is just a weird, rare, bizarre, unusual oddity. You know, it's a curiosity of a car. So it's fun. But people like to look at it. It draws a big crowd. I've had a few people pull in my yard, and usually they come in, like the guys that bring me parts and stuff like that, and they'll ask about certain cars, and it's usually the high dollar, expensive Mopar stuff. And, you know, actually that 55 Pontiac has been a pretty big hit because they don't know what it is, but it's like a 57 or it's like a 55 Chevy, but not. You know, and then they see those wheels and they realize, oh, there's something cool going on there. But this thing, surprisingly, everyone who's walked in the shop when this was parked outside last week, everybody walked by and said, what's that? And I'm like, that's a Hemi. And they're like, really? And, you know, it's funny because I've had old cars sit in the yard and people walk by and don't say anything at all. So this is just nice enough that it brings people joy, and that's what makes the car hobby fun, right? You know, not everything can be a Chevelle or a Barracuda or 15 Camaros parked down at the donut shop. But, you know, you can get like some four-door Fords for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in my area. 56, 58. There's a 56 Phaeton, actually, I could put people in touch with. Ford Phaeton something or other. And it's a beater, and it's got a lot of bad Bondo in it. But you can get in, turn the key, and drive it. And from what I understand, it's just about certified, like safety ready for the road. You know, you get something like that for $4 or $5 grand. I mean, it's a cheap driver. Now, it's not quite as nice as this car, but it's, well, I mean, paint-wise and stuff. It's not as shiny and whatnot. This car's a little more presentable. But there is stuff out there, if you look around. And to me, whatever you get, if you can drive it around and enjoy it, you're probably on the head of the guy who has one in the garage for 10 years. Now, that being said, doesn't mean you can't do both. I drive around in a 79 Firebird, and it's a fun car. And the reason it's a fun car is because I can get in it and turn the key and drive it. The interior it's kind of worn out and faded. The paint is faded, and there's some places where it's starting to fleck off, right? But that being said, I'm not going to restore it right away because I've got a Buick outside that I'm going to start working on, and I'm going to do that one first. And then later on down the road, maybe we'll get at the Firebird. However, I could change my mind and get bored in the winter and you get tired of working on everybody else's stuff. I might just pull the Firebird in because it's a turnkey car, and we might just throw a paint job on it. And that's the thing, right? If you get a car that's good enough, you can buy it, you can drive it. You know, save up for a couple years, throw paint on it. Save up for a couple years, throw an interior on it. Meanwhile, you're driving it the whole time. And in the meantime, I mean, you know, they make seat covers now that aren't, you know, the grandma seat covers of the 80s and 90s. Like, they make some pretty cool stuff now, so you can cover your seats with a half-decent seat cover that looks like a seat. So, anyway, I'm just saying, there's options. You know, an old car like this with a bad seat in it and everything else is good. Throw a Mexican blanket on it. You know, that's totally acceptable because guys were doing it back when they were new. And, yeah, something you can enjoy is definitely fun. Anyway, that's all I'm sharing for today. Probably won't be any videos this week other than this. A little bit of a quiet one. And try to get this ready before week's end because Saturday I believe there's a car show close by, and I know this guy will be at that show. It'd be really cool if you know, we could throw the chrome on this for him Saturday morning. He could actually take it to the car show, see what kind of attention it gets. And like he said, like even with the gray primer, it gets lots of attention. People seem to like this car. Thanks for watching. Cheers.